You know that sound a jackhammer makes when it hits concrete? Multiply that by 10 and add the shriek of a woman in absolute disbelief, and that's what echoed across the neighborhood as city workers carefully chipped away at the chunk of train track underneath Samantha Delaney's brand new BMW. She was screaming bloody murder, flailing her arms like she was directing traffic in a storm, completely unaware or unwilling to accept that she had parked illegally on an active industrial spur. My spur. That's right. That was my crossing. And this is what happens when an HOA president tries to block the only access to a private rail line without understanding who actually owns the land underneath it. Let me rewind, because to really appreciate the crescendo of pettiness, paperwork, and poetic justice that led to Samantha's meltdown, you need the full story. About 12 years ago, I bought a big slice of land roughly 30 minutes outside the city limits. Quiet, a little rugged, perfect for someone like me who prefers solitude and hobbies that involve heavy machinery. The property came with something unique, operational rail spur that connected to a local industrial freight line. Most folks would have seen it as a quirky remnant of the past. But to me, it was a dream realized. My dad and I had always been train fanatics. Vintage steam engines, antique cabooses, diesel locomotive, you name it. After he passed, I inherited not just his collection of rolling stock, but the passion we'd shared. I built a barn on the far edge of my property, customized it into a mini depot, and began restoring the old equipment. Every now and then, I'd roll out a caboose or a flat car for a short trip along the spur. Legal, safe, permitted. It was my private railway paradise. There was only one way to access the line, a 40-foot wide paved crossing that bridged my land to the main track. It had been there since the 1940s, and it came with proper documentation, recognized and grandfathered in by the Regional Transportation Authority. Everything was squared away. Then Samantha moved in. Fresh off a bitter divorce and full of misdirected energy, Samantha Delaney arrived like a gust of passive-aggressive wind. She bought a 2-story colonial near the center of the neighborhood, and within a month she'd appointed herself the community's spiritual leader. Organizing trash pickups, starting petitions for sidewalks, complaining about visual pollution. Her presence was less neighborly and more imperial. And then she pulled the ultimate move. She formed a homeowners association. You know the type: rules about grass length, mailboxes, acceptable paint tones for shutters. Most neighbors, either too polite or too disengaged, didn't protest. Just like that, the Hawthorne Preserve Neighborhood Association was born. And Samantha, of course, became its president. At first, it was just nuisance-level meddling. But eventually, she turned her sights on my rail spur. She called it an eyesore, a safety hazard for children. She even claimed the crossing was now a shared space, part of the community's visual landscape. I laughed. Literally. I handed her the deed, permits, and survey documents proving my ownership, land, track, crossing, and all. Samantha squinted at them like I'd shown her the Magna Carta. Looks outdated, she said, then tossed them back like they were junk mail. A week later, I found orange construction barriers stretched across my entrance. She'd stapled a laminated violation notice to my gate, citing 7 days to cease all industrial activity. Her exact words when I confronted her: "You can't just have trains in a neighborhood. This isn't a rail yard, it's a community." I told her flat out she was trespassing. Her response? "We'll see what the board says." And that board? It was just Samantha, her stone-faced BFF Monica, and a guy named Dennis who thought he joined for free cookies. Not a single one of them knew squat about land use law. Their next meeting, which I wasn't invited to, included a glorious reveal: they were turning the crossing into a community garden and playground. Flyers circulated showing toddlers swinging on a set planted squarely on my tracks. A neighbor, bless him, asked if that was even safe. Samantha smiled and said, "Oh, the tracks are symbolic. No one's used them in years. Except I had just 2 weeks earlier. You'd think the city would intervene." Nope. As far as zoning was concerned, the HOA wasn't removing anything, they were enhancing shared aesthetic space. They dumped gravel, rolled out synthetic turf, and installed a bench where my flat car had once rested. 2 crepe myrtles were planted right on the rails. I didn't react. Not yet. I wanted them to feel triumphant. Let them believe they'd erased something inconvenient. Because what they didn't know was that the paperwork they dismissed as outdated had been formally refiled 5 years earlier when I'd renovated the barn. That gave me active legal status, binding easements with the railway company, and full title to the land. This wasn't just nostalgia. This was recognized private industrial infrastructure. I got to work quietly, called the surveyor, pulled permits that hadn't been used in years, contacted the transportation board. What I was planning wasn't just legal, it was bulletproof. And yeah, I'll admit it got personal. Samantha once referred to my dad's vintage caboose as old junk cluttering the view. She bullied the neighborhood into submission. And she genuinely believed she was untouchable. Then came the letter. Official HOA stationery. Signed by Monica and Dennis. It said that, due to continued non-compliance, they were moving ahead with the removal of the derelict industrial zone within 30 days. A landscaping company had even submitted a demolition schedule. They planned to rip up the Spur using HOA funds. It was laughable, but also beautiful, because now it was all in writing. They were threatening to destroy something they didn't own. And that triggered a clause buried in the original crossing agreement, one that granted me full, indisputable, exclusive ownership in the event of interference. I made one call to Brenda over at the rail company's land office. I asked her what it would take to buy the land outright. Turns out, not much. They were happy to sell. Liability off their books, title into the hands of someone who actually maintained it. 2 weeks later, it was mine. Not just the track, the crossing, the access zone. Every inch. I filed a notice of private access restriction, posted proper signage, scheduled city crews to remove the unauthorized garden and restore the area. When Samantha saw the posted work notice, she went full conspiracy mode. Filmed herself pacing the garden with her phone, ranting about industrial barons and railroad harassment. Uploaded the video to the neighborhood Facebook group. Half the comments were confused. The other half were her usual yes men. I stayed quiet. Then, while combing through old documents, I found a tiny gem. An overlooked easement running through the HOA's new walking trail. It led directly to their community park, complete with gazebo and doggy bag stations. According to my records, I still owned a 10-foot wedge of that land from a parcel merger never properly finalized. They were using it. Publicly. Illegally. I issued a cease and desist. Debbie emailed me asking if we could work something out. I referred her to my attorney. Samantha lost her mind. Called an emergency HOA meeting, waving printed Google Maps and ranting about forged property lines. My favorite quote? "We will not be railroaded by this." Poetic. The city, already briefed, stopped taking her complaints seriously. When she tried to escalate to zoning, she accidentally called the same official who'd approved my closure permit. "Ma'am," the rep said, "you're telling me you outranked the railroad?" Residents started talking to me again. Quietly. One guy brought me cookies. Said he hadn't known what she was doing. I didn't hold it against them. Then came Samantha's final, desperate move. She hired a contractor again to remove the rail spur. Sent them a formal work order. Scheduled demolition for the following Monday. They showed up with trucks and tools. But I saw them. I called the company. "Hi," I said. "Just letting you know you're standing on private land. You're about to dismantle a registered industrial asset. Want to see the paperwork?" 15 minutes later, they were gone. I sent the invoice, along with a breakdown of every one of Samantha's actions, to the HOA board, the city, and my lawyer. Monica resigned within the week. Dennis bailed a few days later. Samantha stood alone. President of an HOA kingdom without subjects. The city suspended all projects pending investigation. And then the rains came. The greenway Samantha had forced into existence sat in the lowest part of the neighborhood. She'd filled in the drainage ditch when she planted her crepe myrtles. When the storm hit, that whole garden turned into a swamp. And right in the middle? Her BMW. Samantha, in one final act of defiance, had driven onto the crossing to prove it was still community property. Her car sank halfway into the mud. A city crew scheduled to do concrete work showed up and found her screaming at them. "You can't be here," she shrieked. One guy looked at me. "Want us to call a tow?" I didn't even answer. She was already on the phone, ranting about sabotage. A small crowd gathered. Teenagers filmed. One of the videos made it to a meme page. It was glorious. The tow truck took 2 hours. The crew finished the repairs. I installed another camera just in case. That week, the HOA message board lit up with questions. The treasurer posted a breakdown of every dollar spent on the greenway with Samantha's signature on every expense. Residents circulated a petition to dissolve the HOA. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Samantha moved out 3 months later. No goodbye. No tantrum. Just a U-Haul and a scowl. Word is, she tried to start another HOA in her new neighborhood. They shut her down before the first meeting. As for me, I reopened the Spur. Rolled out my old locomotive for a slow victory lap. A few neighbors brought their kids to watch. I didn't charge admission, just let them enjoy it. And every Saturday at 9 a.m. I give the old steam whistle a good pull. Not out of spite, just tradition. A weekly reminder that some things can't be stolen, voted away, or gardened over. Some things are earned with patience, paperwork, and the power of persistence. And trains.